As you know, we use this platform to share stories of resilience. And today I have a very special guest. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Sally Allen. And today we have Doralee Quintero on the podcast, and she will share her journey, her resiliency, and what got her to where she is. Now, Doralee is CEO and founder of Heart Our Minds Life Coaching, and she's been doing this for quite a while. She's incredible. Anybody who's in our show, you know that we bring quality people on the show, so I am so excited to have her. Doralee, welcome to the Sally Allen Podcast.
Thank you, Sally. I'm so excited for you having me here, to be here. I'm just excited.
Good. I'm glad. So I'm excited to talk to you about your journey, how you got to Heart Our Minds Life Coaching, because one of the things we start talking about is you help people heal their inner child. Talk about jumping right into it. Tell me your story and how did you get to, working to help people heal their inner child?
So going back to the name of Heart Our Minds, my background is in counseling and mental health, and I really wanted people to embrace their mental health. So it's like Heart Our Minds, and it just came to me one day, and I thought this is it. But it didn't always start off this way. I feel like the best healers are the ones that have been through the worst things, and for me, growing up, it was just I'm not going to say I had a traumatic childhood, but I did see a lot of the holes, I feel like, in our connections as human beings. And I noticed that we disconnect more than we connect. And I saw that by growing up when we were just, we frown on mental health. We frown on feelings and emotions. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable with them. They're too heavy. And when my dad passed away when I was 19, that was one of the things that really annoyed me when I heard people tell me things like, be strong for your mom, be strong for your brother. And I thought, okay, who's going to be strong for me, one? And two, why do I have to be strong? Someone that I love is gone. And I feel like a lot of us are uncomfortable with that, so we don't want people crying around us too much. So it's more of like, be strong because I can't handle your big emotions.
Yeah, you know what? I totally agree with that. I'm currently reading this book, The Grief Recovery Handbook, and I have learned so much, exactly what you're saying. People can't handle it, so they're coming from a space of, I can't handle your emotions, so I'm just going to tell you what makes me feel better. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
So how did you get to the inner child part? Was that where your journey started, to discovering your inner child?
So I got to the inner child part. I went to school to be a counselor. I thought I was going to go to school to be a lawyer. I am a 2-time dating abuse survivor. I was 14 and 17 where I had some really hard experiences. And, when we're that age, we have no idea. We have no idea. Like, we feel invincible. And growing up, just my parents being immigrants and the pressures of, we came to this country, so you must fulfill the dreams of all of us. So it was like all of that pressure, and I didn't get to it right after high school because my ex-boyfriend was extremely abusive, stalked me all the time. And when I finally did make them, and after that, my dad passed away. So it was just like a lot of things that happened within 17 to 19 when he passed, and then 19 to 21 being at a really low place, like in my soul. I was just in a dark place. And a year later, I met my husband who, my boyfriend, but now my husband, and everything sort of started to change from there. I ended up moving from Washington State to Arizona to be with him. I met him on spring break. So I'm one of those girls that you ask, how'd you meet? And I always say, oh, well, I met a boy.
And spring break?
Yeah, and spring break. And it's funny because people always ask, on the internet? I'm like, oh, no, this is before the internet. I'm almost 40.
You're like, listen, I go to spring breaks. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, like there's no proof of it anywhere because we didn't have phones back then. Yeah. Well, we did, but it wasn't documented.
Was it the big Nokia phone you carried around?
It was the Sprint flip phone, the red or the
Oh, okay.
blue.
Oh, okay.
When the
Okay.
one that had
Okay.
the
Yeah.
little display on the front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was too funny. So I meet him, I end up in Tucson, and all of a sudden I find myself working in immigration law as a paralegal. And the people that I'm working with, it's under the VAWA. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Victims Against, oh my gosh, Violence Against Victims Act. It's under VAWA.
Yeah.
And I ended up working there for 5 years, and it was all victims of DV, and it was women. I'm not trying to say that men are not victims, because they are too, but that's when I thought, okay, this is kind of weird. I was my own dating abuse survivor, and now I'm working with victims. Let me go to school to help them and be a lawyer. And I had an epiphany one day, and I thought, no, you know what? I think I'm going to be a counselor to counsel them, to help them release the shame. And so I went into counseling, and I just retired last year as a school counselor.
Wow, congratulations. That's
Thank
a big
you.
deal. So was it last year that you got your business started?
I got my about 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago, yeah.
So there's a question just ringing in my head, and if I don't ask it, then this is not going to go well, because I'm just going to focus on it. I want to go back to something we were talking about when people were saying to you, you know, be strong for your family. I want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you say to people now is so important when it comes to grief? What would you say to someone now? Like, what are some of the things you would say don't say, or this is how you comfort people in their grief?
Yeah, I love that question. So I feel like we need to just sit with people. There is no right or wrong way. I think that I don't want to say victims, but people who experience death in a close family member, they just need someone to sit. We don't need to be fixed. We don't need to be coddled. We don't need to be told you're going to be okay, because it's not. In the moment, it's not okay. So just sitting, let me cry, let me scream, let me have a person next to me and experience that emotion, not really try to fix it right away.
Yeah. Do you also think asking the person what they want or what they would prefer, or are they not in a mindset or headspace to be able to articulate what they need at the time? You just sit with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you just said, because that's true. Because in that moment, we don't really know what we want.
Right.
So it's more of like someone thinking for us, especially when it comes to hygiene, because we don't really think about showers. The days kind of blur together. It's such a blurry time where we don't think about eating. It's starting a new life over. I think that's the biggest thing that people don't understand about death, is that we are starting a brand new life. So the 19-year-old Dora that existed before when her dad was alive is no longer here. It's a brand new human who needs to learn to adjust without another person that she loves.
Oh my gosh, I have never heard it from that perspective. Wow. Austin, have you ever heard that from that perspective? Yeah? I've never heard that. This is new to me, but it's just opened up my eyes to see like that's because, okay, so you're moving forward with missing a part of you.
Yes.
So that's the brand new person. You're moving forward because a piece of you was taken, and this is the new person without that piece.
Yes.
Is that how you would put it?
And it's that, and it's also, we also grieve a lot of ourselves, because we start to think like, oh, when my dad was here, I did this. When my dad was here, we did this together. And it's more of learning how to not be that person anymore. So just understanding that they're not coming back, and I'm a new person now. It's like living in the way that I like to describe it is, so my dad passed away in a hospital. Coming out of the hospital, he died in Seattle, Washington. Coming out, I noticed a bunch of cars just driving by, and people were holding their Starbucks cups, and everything felt different. And I thought, wait, why are they driving? Why is there cars on the street? Why are they having coffee? Like, don't they know the world is not the same? But it was in my head. So it's more of like existing without them, and it's missing the person that was when he was around. So it's like relearning who you are.
Yeah, I'm liking where this is going. Yeah. Do you feel, I saw 2 posts like the past couple of weeks on social media, and one of them was, you really need to understand what people are going through in order to help them. And another one was, you don't need to know what people are going through to help them. You just need to be there for them. Like, what's your take on that? Do you need to, like, if you've gone through it, I know, yes, you can relate. But what's your take on that?
I feel like the biggest thing to connect with people is to just have empathy. I think that a lot of people get empathy and sympathy confused. Sympathy is, I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Empathy is, wow, I know how that feels. And while we don't always know how it feels, because maybe you've never experienced death, or, we don't always know, but it's more of the emotion. It's more of like, I know what it feels like to lose something or someone. And when we approach a situation with empathy, it's easier to connect. Then we feel like we can bring our walls down, we can be vulnerable, we can say, this is what I've experienced, and then it might give you a chance to be like, oh, I've experienced this too, and then the connections just get stronger.
I like that a lot. One of the things I've heard, like I've led a lot of circles and groups and group coaching, and one of the things people always say, like, don't, when a person is sharing and they're sharing something really, really deep, don't hug them when they're crying. And I never understood why not. And I want your perspective on it, and then I'll tell you what I found out. What's your perspective on that? Why not hug the person?
I love this. Okay, so the first thing that comes into my mind is, I've never said that before, but I can see what they're saying. They're saying, if you hug that person, they now feel like they have to coddle you and your emotions. So it's now like, oh no, Sally's sad for me. No, I have to make her feel better. So it almost takes away from the experience that the person who feels down has had. Is how I can, yeah.
No, that's great. I love that perspective. But the other thing I found out, I don't know, I'm going through is grief recovery handbook. I'm almost scared. Like sometimes, when you go through something, you're being prepared for something. I'm like, I'm just hope it's not. I'm just doing it to help my clients. But the thing I found out is also similar to what you were saying. You just put another spin on it. When you hug that person, you actually stop their emotions. They're feeling and they're feeling and they're feeling, and you get in there and you hug them. It's almost like, okay, it's done. Let me give you a hug. Because a hug is almost like a comforting thing. You're done with this. Let me comfort you. What's your thoughts on that?
I can see that. So when I see a hug, I wonder if it's not only just the comforting, but it's more of the conversation is over, just like you said. But I feel like, I know, I think you're onto something. I think it's that. I drew a blank right now.
It's okay.
I just had it in my head and I'm like, where did it go?
It happens to me all the time. Don't worry about it. All the time it happens to me, so don't even worry about it. So I want to go back. This is interesting, right? Healing your inner child. I've never met anybody who's worked on that's their niche specifically. I want you to tell me about that and how you do it. Like, what's your process?
So with healing our inner child, I feel like there are like 3 different containers inside of us. And this is just, I'm very spiritual. I'm very connected to God. I'll be honest, I'm not the best religious person. I don't really open up a Bible, but I talk to him every day and he's in my heart. But healing our inner child is in 3 different containers. It's like from the ages of 5, 10 to 15. I think that we've all been through pivotal moments around that time. And when we as adults get triggered, when we are in relationships, when we feel like, I'm just not being heard, I'm not being seen, it triggers that 5-year-old in us who was trying to get mom and dad's attention, or the 10-year-old in us who went to school and didn't really know, hey, do I fit in here? We come with so much, with different worldviews, and it's really relating to that person. So when we as grown-ups don't set boundaries, when we as grown-ups don't stand up for ourselves, when we don't know how to communicate because it wasn't taught to us, it goes back to that little person who was told to like be quiet, don't show up. Like kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. It goes all the way back to that.
Yeah, wow. I like that a lot. I read something about that. Maybe it's back to the grief recovery handbook. But I do.
I love this. I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's what you said. I saw that somewhere, that the trauma starts with the childhood. And the reason why the trauma starts with the childhood is because the example they gave, like your dog died, and because you're 5 or 6 years old, your parents is not equipped on how you should deal with this grief or how you should deal with it. So what do? It's okay, honey, we can replace the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? Talk to me about what happens when they do that.
So it takes away from the experience. It takes away from like the love that I had for this person. It's not about replacing the dog. It's more about just connecting, like the connections that I had made. And also our parents, I mean, I talk a lot about generational trauma.
Yeah.
Our parents aren't trained or weren't conditioned to talk about emotions.
Yeah.
So instead of me honoring your emotions, it makes me uncomfortable. So I'll say, it's okay, you're going to be fine. Let's buy a new one. Let's go to PetSmart right now. Let's find one. Let's go to Craigslist, see what they have. And that's also because our parents don't really know how to sit in our grief, because negative emotions aren't really talked about. They're not comfortable. It's more of show your feelings when you're happy, but when you're crying, don't do it here, do it in private.
Yeah, and I think this generation that we're coming out of and going into our age group, especially, this mental wellness is so important. Everybody's talking about it now, especially since COVID. But the generations before that, it's just taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think
Absolutely.
there? I think there's a lack of awareness, but there are also cultural taboos, like and pride. Tell me a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I feel like our cultures keep us stuck a lot. I think that there are rules that we're supposed to live by as humans. We're supposed to be, so I'll only speak for my culture, but I'm a Mexicana, and we're supposed to be tough, and we're supposed to be hardworking, and we're not supposed to show emotion because that's a form of weakness. And so we carry that with us all of the time. And because of that, our parents tell us to be tough, don't show emotion. And not only that, but then we'll also shame ourselves. We'll shame each other. We'll say, "Oh, that makes you sad? Oh, that's silly. That's a
Yeah.
dog. Like, what's wrong with you?" And so we start to gaslight ourselves. Like, "Oh, maybe she's right. Am I crying over a dog? This is crazy." And then so we start to repeat that cycle, and then when we go to have kids, we do the same. But it's more of just emotions are emotions. They're not right or they're not wrong. It's not, it doesn't mean that you're a failure as a person or a parent because you're sad. It just means you're a human. And I think we just try to fix it right away. We just try to like put a Band-Aid on it and like, let's move on. We got to go to work.
Yeah, and I think it's like people say, don't feel angry about this. I'm already angry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna feel. Tell me what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the thing. Tell me what to do with it when I feel this way. So that being said, I want to go back to you. And when you and I, before the podcast, you said some pivotal things to me, which, you know, when you go into something, you have sometimes you go through it, and then you understand it, and that's what propel you to go into the inner child coaching. Tell me about your inner child story.
So for me, I always felt like I needed to prove something. And I felt that even as a grown up, even as I did all of the things that you're supposed to do, I'm supposed to get married, I'm supposed to have kids, I'm supposed to be a good daughter and honor my parents by giving them degrees. And so I did all of those things, and I thought, wait, why am I still shutting down? Why am I still unhappy? What is wrong with me? There has to be a reason as to why I'm doing these things. And it all goes back to feeling like I'm not enough. Like it doesn't matter. It's very cultural. Like I don't want to like bash on parents because our parents are also part of the cycle very much so. But it goes back to, for me, Mom, I'm gonna be a counselor instead. It's like, oh, not a lawyer. It's like a little higher. And I thought, wait, no, I thought a master's degree is kind of cool. Like, well, I want a doctor in the family. So it's never enough, and it triggers that like 5-year-old or that 10-year-old who is trying to be herself and then is told, no, no, that's too much. I don't like what you're being, so be this. And that slowly starts to mute our intuition, because we all have our gut, our inner, our voice, and we start to question ourselves like, oh, I think they're right. I think I'm not supposed to be doing this thing. So something must be wrong with me. I must be born broken. So let me listen to them, and because that they know what's best. And so we get triggered in all sorts of ways. And that's what I found myself. I found myself being triggered. Like I'm doing all of this work and I still don't feel enough. I feel like I walk into a room and I still want to be quiet because I don't want to raise my hand. Like the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
don't belong here.
Yeah. I just love that. Mute your intuition. I just love that. But you didn't let anybody mute your intuition. You're like, I am going to do what I want to do.
Yes.
So how did you work towards your inner child healing?
So I had to just listen to my voice. Ever since I was little, I've always felt different. I was 10 years old, having my mom take me to Nickelodeon Disney auditions. No one was going to pick me. No one was going to pick a little. I mean, I don't want to blame. I don't want to keep saying like the brown girl, but I just wasn't what they wanted at that time.
Right.
But I felt this weird, like different part of me. I was
Right.
also a professional daydreamer. So I grew up picking cherries, picking apples, cutting asparagus in the fields, and I would just sit there and just envision my life as like this superstar. I'm like, oh, this is me. I can do this. And it's that feeling of you're not supposed to be here. And I felt like that even when I was a school counselor. Like it's like, okay, this is okay, but you're not supposed to be here. It's that like little voice that shows you pictures of everything else, and you're like, maybe it's right. Maybe I should make a move and take off and do the thing that I want to do.
And you followed that.
And I followed it, and I'm sitting on your couch now.
Yeah, like I'm doing the things that I want to do. This is who I am. And you feel like right now you're fulfilled, and that inner child, like you have made her proud.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know who she is. I keep her picture with me everywhere. I understand her. Whenever she felt small, I make sure, or whenever she feels small, I make sure I stand up for her. I set those boundaries. I don't tell her, hey, that's too big and scary. I'm like, okay, this is what you want to do. Let's go do it. So I just kind of flow with what I feel, and it really brings out my intuition too.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Wow. I have, as a mindset coach, I have 6 modalities, and one of them is confidence, building self-confidence, and imposter syndrome. They kind of tie together. And I was on with a client a couple of weeks ago, and he was sharing with me about his journey, how he's so lacks self-confidence and self-esteem right now. And the way I help them, my process is different, but I want to know your process. But I'll tell you what my process is. I take him back to his past. I take him back because they think they're coming to coaching and I'm going to fix them and put a Band-Aid on them.
Right.
I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I can give you a process to take away, but it's like having cancer and I just put a Band-Aid on it instead of going in and treating it and getting the root cause of it. So I sat with him and we found out, which he didn't know, it stemmed from his father always comparing him to his brother. And it was such an eye-opening. But the part that works with me is I picture, let them close their eyes and picture him carrying the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, the 7-year-old, like the middle school, from elementary to middle school. He still has that child holding his hands and carrying him everywhere he goes. Yes, and let go of that child. And
I love that.
Yeah, and it's so visual to them. Like they're like, oh my gosh, so all I have to do is let go? Yeah, you gotta let that child go and then start working on your healing. So that's kind of my process that I walk him through. What's your process?
So the way that I like to see it is I have them picture like your inner child at whatever age they felt the lowest is stuck in a closet, like stuck in a shame closet with the lights off and the boogeyman in his ear telling him, you're never going to be enough. Stop it right here. You're not good enough. You need to, like, don't even go after that thing because they're going to laugh at you. And so we have to like go in there and open up that door and be like, no, I got you now. Because as children, our survival depends on our parents. Yeah. And our parents are also humans. So if they couldn't show up for us, it wasn't because we were bad or we weren't good, but we as children made the story up in our head that it was because of us. And so we formed, narratives, false narratives, like mom's in a bad mood because of me. So let me go and clean the house and make sure everything is people-pleasing is born from there. So we create these narratives and these stories, and I like to have them picture that, like, look, your inner child is in there, so you need to open up the door and say, I'm in charge now. I have control now. You don't depend on your parents anymore. You are now an adult. You pay your own way. You pay your own bills. You show up for you. Open up that door and then grab that little person's hand and be like, let's go. We're leaving this closet. We're going to fulfill all of the dreams you've ever had.
Wow. I like that a lot. I like it a lot. I'm thinking I saw that process somewhere. I'm trying to think where I saw it. But I want to ask you something. I don't know where I heard this. I'm always like this leadership podcast junkie, but I heard somewhere that um, I'm trying to remember where to articulate it well, but I don't know. But the process they were giving people is when you're bringing your children up, that children should honor their mom. And when they honor their mom, that's when they're honoring their family. So dad should say to a child, if you if the child leaves the towel on the floor, dad should say, mom should go in and that, and say, are you honoring me? And if the child says, no, then mom said, ask me to please pick up the towel because you're not honoring me, so I'll pick up the towel. So mom picks up the towel, and next time the child will honor mom. It didn't sit right in my spirit. I'm like, this is sounding not
Yeah, I don't know
weird
if I
to
like
me.
that.
It didn't sound.
Yeah.
It's you do it for mom because then you're always doing things for people. Your people pleasing comment triggered that and reminded me of it.
Right.
But does that sit right with you? Tell me about it. Like, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that what causes a lot of our trauma is we have a blind loyalty to our parents,
Yeah.
and we forget that our parents are humans, and there's a lot of emotional immaturity.
Okay.
And so when the child feels like they have to make mom or dad feel better, then we've already gone backwards. Now the child is the parent, and this is where like a lot of those inner child wounds come from. But when we understand that, look, our parents are who they are and they have rules for me and I depend on their survival, so I will do what they ask me to do, which is totally fine. But when we grow older and we have like parents who will say, well, you have to take care of me, well, you have to do this. And that creates a conflict, an internal conflict, like, well, that doesn't sit right with me. And if you're mean to me and you are hypercritical and you make me feel this bad, I'm not going to come around at Christmas. And then the parent gets confused. It's like this whole thing. But no, I don't agree with the towel. No, it.
To honor the mom, like
Yeah.
that didn't sit. I'm talking to you about it, and you triggered me to talk about it because I'm sitting there looking like puzzled. What?
Yeah.
I think you're confusing the child
Right.
because I think they'll always feel like they have to go out there and honor someone, have that type of system instead of having an internal compass.
Right. Yes. And as parents, it's our job to understand our kids. It's our job to meet them emotionally. They didn't ask to be born. We gave birth to them. And so it's our job to be like, okay, what is it that you're needing? What is it that I'm missing? How can I help you? And of course, they're their own humans. And I'm not saying like we need to coddle them forever, but it's our job to at least let them feel understood and let them just be who they are. But when we go into comparing kids to one another, it diminishes their character. It's almost like, wait, why is their character better than my character?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and then there's like a competing for parents' love, and it's the whole thing too. But no, yeah, we have to understand our kids. We had them.
So your husband doesn't tell your kid if you don't pick up the towel, you're not honoring mom.
No, no. If he did, that would be a problem. And they still wouldn't pick up the towel. They would say, who's mom? And we're not honoring anybody.
I had this quizzical look. I'm like, what? This doesn't sit right with me. What is this? What is this? Yeah, yeah. So what's something you want our audience to know about you, what you do? What's something you want them to know?
I think the biggest thing is that if you've ever been through something difficult and you're holding on to shame, I want you to think about why you're holding on to the shame that you're holding on to. I've worked with a lot of clients by now, and when we are victimized or something happens to us as children, we take it on as our own, and we forget that we're not the ones who asked for the thing. So don't hold on to someone else's bag of laundry. Don't hold on to someone else's stuff. So just like releasing yourself from that shame, because if you keep replaying a story in your head about how bad you are, or things happen to you because you were not a good person, it's going to keep you stuck and keep you away from your purpose.
Yeah.
So just releasing the things that people have done to you, because you don't need to hold on to it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And would you agree, build new neural pathways in terms of thinking new thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And being okay to go against the grain. Being okay.
Yes.
Being okay to disagree with your parents. We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Austin, do you have an audience question for us?
I do. So for this week, we have the question of every time you ask me, I have it and then I lose it, but I found it. How can individuals stay motivated and maintain consistency in their wellness routines over the long term?
How can they stay consistent over the long term? I would say to just make sure that you're honoring yourself. If it makes you feel good, if you are showing up for you, to really stay true to that. I think the biggest thing that distracts us is other people. So having the courage to say, you know what, I like the way this makes me feel and I want to keep moving forward with it, and having the courage to say, you may not agree with what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it because it's for me and it's for my future.
That's spot on. That's spot on, because I feel what you're saying is a form of self-care.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel daily doses of self-care. I was just trying to make a video on self-affirmations.
I love that.
Yeah, we talk about I forgot what we talked about just now, but I was gonna tie it in. But if we're talking about self-care, I think daily doses, creating neural pathways, what you tell yourself, words are important, and it turns into the compound effect, right? If you're improving 0.25% every day, by the end of the year, you would have had so much percentage of improvement, which is pretty awesome. Yeah,
Absolutely.
all right. Anything else, Doralee, before we wrap up this session?
No, I think we're good. I'm glad that we had this conversation. I love talking about inner child. There's a lot of layers, and I talk a lot about generational trauma. So there's things like culture and religion that's like for a whole other segment. But this was a good
It's a good segue
Yeah.
starting point.
for sure. Yes. So
Okay.
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And with that, friends, it's a wrap. Until next time.